Hello, and welcome to show number 2516 of Eyes on Success, a weekly program empowering the visually impaired with expert advice, personal stories, and the latest in technology and accessibility. I'm Nancy Goodman Torpey.
And I'm Pete Torpey.
One time we had an order come from, I believe it was Instacart, may have been Shipt, but we got like 3 pounds of apples that we didn't buy. Someone bought them, but they showed up for free in our order. So that was a nice summer surprise for us that we weren't expecting, but was very welcome.
When we order food or meals online, it doesn't always come out right, but today we'll be talking about some of those experiences and how to deal with it.
Dinner Delivered is a guide for visually impaired individuals on using grocery and meal delivery services. We'll talk with Kim Loftis Nova, who co-authored the book with Chris Grabowski Nova, about navigating platforms like Instacart, Shipt, and DoorDash, to name a few. Kim will share her experiences using these services, as well as provide some practical tips for using them. But first, for our tip of the week. This week's tip comes from Kim Loftis Nova.
Sometimes when you go into stores, particularly craft stores, you may find these really cute canvas bags. They're strong, they're sturdy, and a lot of times you can get them for $1 or $2. These are excellent for carrying around those groceries that you may have delivered. Or you may even want to use them as a storage solution. So let's say your husband has his favorite type of cereal, you have your favorite type. You could keep yours in one of your nice canvas bags, and you would be able to distinguish it easily. So I have all sorts of praise for these little bags. They're environmentally friendly, they're cute, and they're very convenient.
You know, we live in Colorado, and you can't even pay for a plastic bag anymore if you want it.
That's how it is here in New York, too.
It's getting harder and harder to get bags from the stores.
Yep.
And this is a great solution.
Absolutely.
Support for Eyes on Success is provided by
the Blind Institute of Technology, a global nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing accessibility and inclusion. BIT offers training programs and connects skilled professionals with disabilities to career opportunities. More information is at blindit.org.
And by
Biped AI, the manufacturer of Noah, an all-in-one mobility vest. Noah provides GPS navigation, detects obstacles, and describes surroundings using cameras and AI. Available through many distributors. More information is available at biped.ai.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success.
Let's start by meeting Kim.
Today's guest has been with us before, and we talked about her previous book about dating applications previously, and today she has another book to talk to us about. So, Kim, for people who don't remember you, tell people who you are and what you do.
Hi, my name is Kim Nova. I write lots of books for National Braille Press, which is a great gig. If you are looking at the book cover for this particular book that we're going to be talking about today, you will notice that my name has changed. It was previously Loftis, so if you're a bit confused, I am now Nova because I got married. And in addition to writing books, I also edit a magazine for National Braille Press. And my other day job is doing a great deal of audio documentation for the company my husband and I own, Mystic Access, through which we also do a bi-weekly podcast full of all kinds of interesting goodies.
So this actually adds some credibility to the book we were talking with you about 6 years ago that you wrote called Dating in the Digital Age. I guess it worked.
It worked. Not quite in the way that I don't think any of us anticipated at the time. But yes, magical things happened and it worked. So yes, 3.5 years of marriage later, I'm no longer in the dating pool.
And you are visually impaired yourself, right?
Yes, I am totally blind.
Tell us a little bit about your company, Mystic Access.
Our company motto is to teach technology in a way that is as stress-free as possible. And there used to be, back in the day, in the 90s particularly, lots of audio documentation that came with one's technology, whether that was a screen reader or, in our case, the old Braille and Speak products that Chris and I both remember so fondly. And we wanted to bring that back because that hasn't happened in a while. A lot of times you do not get a lot of documentation, much less audio documentation with your products. And we wanted to bring that back into the market. So Mystic Access was born as a result of that dream. And we've worked with a lot of companies over the last several years to make that happen. And we also do a lot kind of on our own initiative as well to bring more blindness and mainstream audio documentation to people's lives. So whether it's something like the Amazon ECHO or ALEXA products, as you may know them, I can't say that word in my house.
You do have to watch out.
Yes, absolutely. Or a more blindness-specific product, such as something like a HumanWare Victor Reader Stream. We offer all kinds of documentation to help people learn and be able to follow along with us to get to know the process of learning particular tech. So we have a great deal of fun doing this.
Well, and that sounds very useful.
Support for Eyes on Success comes from our listeners and corporate sponsors.
For more information about airing promotional items on the show, send an email to hosts@eyesonsuccess.net.
This week's focus topic is Kim Loftis Nova and Chris Grabowski Nova's book, Dinner Delivered.
Well, today, Kim, we want to talk to you about another book that you wrote. And tell us the name of the book and a little bit about it.
Well, this book is called Dinner Delivered, and hopefully the name is somewhat self-explanatory. In this, we talk about various delivery services. And when we initially wrote this book, maybe they weren't quite so much a part of our lives as they became very soon after. So we talk about food delivery services such as DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, but we also talk about grocery delivery services like Instacart and Shipt, and how they can really, specifically for those of us who are blind, assist us in making that chore of making sure you get exactly what you want a little easier, hopefully a little more efficient, and get that stuff straight to your door so maybe you don't have to go and hire a Lyft or an Uber yourself and then go struggle to find whatever it is that you're searching for. So we thought it would be material that would provide a lot of convenience to the lives of our fellow blind and visually impaired readers.
As a coincidence, yesterday afternoon we were standing in front of the egg section at our local grocer trying to find a dozen eggs that we could afford.
Yes.
And this man was standing next to us, and we engaged in a conversation, and he was actually an Instacart shopper. So his job was to be the guy at the store who bought all the stuff and brought it to the customer's house. And I was really impressed that he was going out of his way to get exactly what the customer had requested.
We have met some very cool, just wonderful shoppers through particularly Shipt and Instacart who are very proud of the fact that they can get us exactly what we want. In fact, right before Christmas a couple years ago, we had a shopper, and when he delivered everything, he sent us a little note and said, I wanted to make sure I found the exact Christmas ornaments you guys picked out. So he was very proud of that, and we were very appreciative to him. They do an amazing job.
What I think is neat about your book is, if you're not familiar with using these services, they can seem a little intimidating. You don't know exactly how they work or what to expect, and you're afraid to just jump in and try it. But your book really outlines for each of these services how to sign up for it, how to find what you want, search for what you want, order what you want, give directions to the person doing the collecting for you. It's very detailed, and it takes the mystery out of it.
Thank you. Well, that was definitely our intention. And the irony about the creation of this book was Chris and I were not married at the time, and we were in two different states. And I was in a very rural area and could not even access a lot of the services myself to do this stuff. So I was working remotely with him to make sure that we both knew what we were doing. And it was a very strange process because I couldn't actually order any food myself. So it was a very strange way to write a book. But I'm glad we could nevertheless provide all the necessary details to the reader to make sure it wasn't, as you said, as intimidating a process for them to find what they wanted.
But that was an interesting wrinkle in how you wrote the book, because you talked about, well, Chris on his Instacart page saw this, but of course I couldn't get that because I lived in a different area.
Yes.
And so it was actually a very clear indication of just because one person can find certain things in their area, it's not necessarily available everywhere. And so you may have to look at different services or different options depending on your geographic location.
That is absolutely right. In fact, I guarantee you in my hometown, you still can't get Instacart or Shipt all these years later. So, unfortunately, sometimes, particularly in a more rural area, some of these things may not be available, but yet you may be able to get some restaurant delivery, such as something from DoorDash or Grubhub. So, it definitely pays to enter your zip code into some of these services and find out what is available for you. And then you can start making some decisions from there as to number one, how you may want to read the book, and number two, what you might want for dinner, because you'll find different things in different places.
So when you moved to an area where these services are available, did you find your book a useful reference for yourself?
Yes, definitely. I did go back and do a little review, and things have gotten progressively easier, I feel, and more accessible over the years. So that's a great thing. Some of the services that we mentioned in the book had some hiccups initially in terms of their accessibility and how one would tackle accessing that service with a screen reader, for instance, or in the app. And some of them, I think there was one that wasn't even accessible using the app at the time of writing the book. And fortunately, a lot of those wrinkles have been ironed out over the years, and pretty much no matter your platform now, you should be able to successfully access all of these services. So yes, there was a little bit of review done and just a lot of experimentation on my end and just having fun seeing what was available now that I am in a medium-sized metro area. And that part was fun as well. Just kind of figuring out what you have in your area can be quite entertaining.
So basically, even though the book is 5 or 6 years old, there may be more information in there than is necessary now because, as you put it, some of these wrinkles have been ironed out. But it's not missing anything that people are going to need in order to access any of these services.
Most definitely. That is absolutely correct. I think if you're willing to have fun with it and be willing to play with the apps a little bit, you will get all the mechanics you need from reading the book. You'll learn the basics of what the process is like, which is the most important thing. And then you'll be able to branch out a little on your own and find out what you want and add it to your cart. And then kind of go through and follow a little bit based on what's in the book. And those changes that have occurred will probably be for the better. So I think it will be an easier process now, certainly, than it was previously.
So you mentioned briefly, and you also mentioned in the book, that there are differences in the shopping experiences when you do it from the web versus from the associated app. What do you think those differences are these days? Do you have a preference, or would you guide someone one way or another, or is it just a matter of which platform they're more comfortable with?
I absolutely think it's what platform you're more comfortable with. You may find in some instances that the app is a little easier because so many places do encourage you to use the app. If you have a smartphone, if you're comfortable using your smartphone, I would definitely recommend trying the app, even if you are fairly comfortable already with the experience of using your PC or your Mac. Because you may find that it's a slightly cleaner experience, a little less cluttered, a little more intuitive, but you might not. Don't be afraid to experiment between platforms. I am an app person myself. I will go for an app almost every time, but you will still run into apps, both in delivery and otherwise, where they aren't quite as accessible as the website. So a little experimentation is probably a good thing, and you'll figure out fairly quickly what's going to work. for you.
So you have sections in the book for getting groceries and getting meals delivered. What significant differences, if any, are there between those two categories of services?
Not much. I think that grocery delivery may require a little more searching on your part because depending on what it is, we all may have that favorite brand. Or, as you were just stating, we might be desperately searching for the cheapest dozen eggs we could possibly find. And in order to do that, it may take a little more browsing than finding a hamburger or sushi. So you may just want to take a little more time with your grocery delivery and study what's available than you would with restaurant delivery. So I think it's more or less just finding what works for you because sometimes we are a little more particular with what we want from a grocery store. At least I can be. Sometimes I'm perfectly happy having the store brand, but for those few things, I might want something specific, and others may be the same way.
Well, if nothing else, the typical grocery store has a whole lot more items available for you to choose from than the typical restaurant.
Most definitely.
And we're talking like hundreds or thousands versus a couple dozen at most.
Yes, and even though you're shopping either through an app or a website, I do find that if you can search for a product, it is so much easier than when you are standing in a store having perhaps someone telling you, okay, there's this type of bread, these types of rolls, this type of cereal. You'll be able to find that on your own. It's a very empowering thing to be able to choose the exact brand or size or ingredients that you want in your particular foods. I've always really liked that part of the process.
Well, I'll bet, because you feel that you're taking up someone's time, inconveniencing them. Plus, it's a bit of a hassle. If you can just choose items yourself, that has to be a lot easier and less frustrating.
So much easier. And I also find that in many cases, particularly when we're looking at grocery stores, you can find the deals aisle or coupons, and those can save quite a bit of money depending on what you happen to be looking for that day or what you might find that would be a good freezer stocker. So that can really be helpful as well. Even if you aren't necessarily looking for the particular thing you find, you might say, well, I can make something with this, or actually, this would be really delicious for breakfast tomorrow. So you can definitely save money if you are kind of careful and pay attention to what you're finding in those aisles.
So in your book, you covered in detail services such as Instacart, Shipt, and Amazon, and these are ostensibly internet services. But these days, a lot of local groceries are doing their own delivery. Can you make any distinction between doing it one way or another?
Not personally. For the most part, we have stuck with Shipt and Instacart as opposed to going to the local grocery delivery sites. I know people who have done it and continue to do it successfully, and it works well for them. In other cases, I've spoken to people and maybe the site isn't as accessible as they want. So I think it definitely varies. Certainly, if I were to find a local place that delivered and I was really wanting something that they had, I would absolutely be willing to make the attempt. You're really not going to learn how well it works for you or how accessible the process is for you if you don't try. So I would definitely encourage, if you find something locally that you would like to try and they deliver themselves, absolutely try it out and see how it works for you.
The other thing to check is what kind of fees these various services charge, because you're going to get the groceries one way or the other, and you'll probably get what you asked for. But with some of the services, they may be charging a service charge.
That's absolutely the case. So I definitely recommend, no matter what you're using, turn on your notifications if you're using the app, because you will find out if there are deals. We had a deal one time near Thanksgiving on Instacart where we could save $40 on our next 2 orders. So $40 a piece on each order. Needless to say, we had a much happier Thanksgiving as a result because we ordered when that discount was available. So that is a very helpful tip and can really get you some savings. So the fees won't necessarily feel as pinching when you're able to save that much on the groceries you're purchasing.
We actually ran into an unfortunate situation. I'm fully sighted. Pete's totally blind. So I usually just drive to the store and purchase our groceries in person. But one time we both had COVID. Neither one of us could go into the store for obvious reasons. And so we did the thing where you create a list, and then I felt like I was safe in the parking lot, and I masked up and let the guy put the groceries in the trunk from a distance. And he shows up at the trunk of the car and he says, "This is for Joe, right?" And I'm like, I don't know who Joe is, but it's a good bet he's not ordering the same food we are. So I don't know what Joe got, but we didn't take his order. And the manager of the store was so nice. He was apologizing all over himself. And an hour or so later, he showed up at our front door with what we actually asked for.
Oh.
But you have to watch out. Things can go wrong. And now we can laugh about it. But boy, at the time, he's like, "Well, would you like to come in and go shopping yourself?" I said, "No, that's the whole point. You don't want either one of us in your store."
That's absolutely the case. On the opposite end of that spectrum, one time we had an order come from, I believe it was Instacart, may have been Shipt, but we got like 3 pounds of apples that we didn't buy. Someone bought them, but they showed up for free in our order. So that was a nice summer surprise for us that we weren't expecting, but was very welcome.
So what are some of the pitfalls that people might expect?
There are times when you'll get a delivery person who perhaps puts your food or your groceries in an unexpected place. We have a real problem, and we've talked to sighted folks who have this happen as well, with people putting their delivery directly in front of the door. Now, you can imagine that you don't want your food and drinks directly in front of your door. Bad things will happen. And this happens fairly regularly. We tend to rate Dashers or others who do this lower just because we have specific instructions. You can put instructions in your notes on all of your services for your shoppers to read and know what you need them to do. So that can be an unfortunate thing. Sometimes they will also put deliveries at the tops of your stairs. You have porch stairs directly at the top. And sometimes this can be a problem, particularly here in a snowy state in the Northeast where we get lots of snow and ice. And that can be treacherous, particularly if you don't know that bag's right there in front of you. So our new trick is to make sure we have a visual interpreting service close by, either Ira or Be My Eyes, that we can take out there with us if we can't find the food on the first pass and make sure we can find what it is that we're looking for. Those are definitely two of the most inconvenient pitfalls that we found that can happen.
You mentioned the idea of giving specific instructions to your shopper. I hadn't realized that. That was something I learned from your book. In addition, it sounded like you could also have an interaction with your shopper as they were shopping. If they didn't find what you wanted and wanted to ask if there was something else, they would sometimes text you back and forth and have a little interaction.
That is absolutely true. Some shoppers are particularly excellent to work with that way. They will go above and beyond to try and help you find what it is that you're looking for. Sometimes if you can't find something to put in your cart and there's something specific you're searching for, you could say to your shopper, "Hey, I'm looking for X, Y, or Z," and they will attempt to find it for you. And some of them will work their little hearts out to make sure that they find what you're looking for. They will do their very best. So it'll depend a little bit on your shopper, but in general, you'll have great results if you just communicate with your shopper and let them know what it is you're looking for. The one thing you might have to do is remind them or let them know that you can't see the pictures that they are snapping for you, because many times they will send photos and those aren't always accessible to us. So you may have to explain to your shopper that, "Hey, can you just tell me the title of this item or what it says on the package," or whatever. And most people will work with you very happily.
I guess overall, you guys have been pretty satisfied with these services and use them regularly.
Yes, absolutely. We are now endeavoring to eat out far less, but we definitely still use the grocery services and have cut down on our door dashing for sure. But it is fun to know that the services are available when we want a treat, for sure.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success.
Now, for this week's final item, how to get Kim Loftis Nova's book, Dinner Delivered, that she co-authored with her husband, Chris Grabowski Nova, and how to contact them.
Well, Kim, if people want to get a hold of your book, remind them about the name of the book and tell them where they can get it.
Fantastic. Well, we certainly hope you will enjoy the book. It is called Dinner Delivered, and it is available through the National Braille Press. To get there, you will go to NBP for nationalbraillepress.org.
And if people had questions for you or Chris, would they be able to contact you somehow?
Most definitely. You can email us. The email address to get to both of us is info, I-N-F-O, at Mystic Access, MYSTICACCESS.com.
And if anybody's interested in the services provided by Mystic Access, how would they get hold of those?
You can visit mysticaccess.com. That'll take you to our main site. And from there, you can find all sorts of interesting information, our FAQ, or about us information. You can also reach the podcast from there or find out all about the many free audio downloads we have available. So there's lots of ways to learn about us, listen to what we have to offer. If you want to go straight to the podcast and check out previous episodes, we have a podcast come out every other Tuesday. You can visit mysticaccesspodcasts.com.
And what kinds of topics do you typically cover in your podcast?
We cover everything from technology to all the strange things that can happen in life as a blind couple. We definitely have a sense of humor. We will laugh at each other and share stories about our life. So it's a mix of technology, of classes that we may be teaching, and of just strange things that happen in real life.
So I'm curious, on the book cover, it lists you as Kim Loftis and Chris as Chris Grabowski. And then you said you married Chris and your new name is Nova.
There is a story behind that. When we got married, right before we got married, obviously, when we had gotten engaged, we started having a conversation and decided to create a new name for the two of us. And one of the things that happened when we first met back in 2011, one of the first real serious conversations we had was about astronomy and the stars and everything out there. So Nova we became. He changed his name, and then when I got married, I took Nova.
Wow, what a great story. I love that.
So neither name on the book cover is current.
Yeah, exactly. It's very confusing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, these days you have choices.
Exactly.
If you missed any of that information, you can find it in the show notes associated with this episode, which is number 2516. And we'll also have a link to their book at the National Braille Press in the show notes.
That's it for today's show. Next week on Eyes on Success, we'll be talking about the Able Artist Foundation. The Able Artist Foundation supports low-income disabled musicians around the world by providing discounted music software and hardware to its members. We'll talk with founder Stephen Letness about what motivated him to start the organization, their company partners, and about the special programs they offer for their members.
Thanks for joining us this week, and we hope you'll catch us again for next week's episode.
You've been listening to Eyes on Success, hosted and produced by Nancy Goodman Torpey and Peter Torpey.
You can access the full archive of previous shows, subscribe to the podcast, and much more by going to our website, www.eyesonsuccess.net. If you have questions about anything you've heard on the show or have suggestions for future shows, send an email to hosts@eyesonsuccess.net.
Thank you for listening and have a nice day.